It's time to unravel the hidden mysteries of the universe. Time to uncover the truth hidden beneath the veil of lies. Time to transport your mind from the perverted matrix and connect with your higher consciousness into the world of the divine paradigm. The divine paradigm. And now your hosts of the Divine Paradigm, Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin.
Aloha and welcome to Divine Paradigm on KCOR at KCORradio.com. And I am your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer today is Tina Marie, and our very special guest is Cory. Caroline is a filmmaker, futurist, international speaker, and a visionary author of best-selling books on consciousness and quantum healing. As a child and throughout her life, Cory has had numerous otherworldly encounters, which led her to become deeply connected to spirituality, the study of consciousness, and the mechanics of the universe. In 2008, Cory founded Omnium Media, a consciousness-based entertainment and media platform for the creation of digital apps, healing videos, and higher awareness feature films. Her latest documentary film is called E.T. Contact, They Are Here, which studies the science of contact and otherworldly realities, and has so far won 3 awards and 4 official selections at film festivals across the nation. In addition to writing and producing, Cory has appeared as a guest expert on supernatural phenomenon at major conferences and television shows, including History Channel's most popular series, Ancient Aliens. And Sash, would you like to say anything before we bring on Caroline?
We've had lots and lots of testimonials, witnesses, all kinds of ancient literature that point to the thing that finally Caroline has proven now that we have DNA analysis. And so this is a really exciting program because this is the evidence that we've all been waiting for.
And welcome to our show, Caroline.
Oh, Janet, thanks for having me. Hi, Sasha. That was a great intro. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. That's your bio. So, I'm an experiencer too. Just to give you a little heads up here, and Dr. Lessin and I have worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of experiencers. Dr. Lessin's been a hypnotherapist since the 60s. And he worked with John Mack, and they studied together under Stan Groff, and he was there when John was uncovering, some of the mysteries of the earlier experiencers that were coming through his sessions. So that's a little bit of our background. But tell us.
Yes, that's great. So we're a perfect match.
Yeah.
So for me, I started having first, I want to call it conscious contact experience, happened at the age of 5. And so for me, I'm not coming from the angle of having seen UFOs or having had the experience of being on a spaceship per se. So that's not my background, but for me, it actually started at the age of 5 when I encountered a group of beings, and they were just light beings. So, and they just showed up in the living room, and we started communicating telepathically. And so I realized at that time that I could perceive the subtle energy very clearly. So in other words, I could not just see them with my, human eyes, but I could kind of tap into their consciousness. In other words, without having any preparation, obviously, I could kind of understand and know where they came from, and I could convert all of the telepathic messages that they were sending me. And we were communicating back and forth for a while. And so at that time, they kind of told me that we come from a similar lineage and we were going to be connected throughout my life, my human life. And the way we were going to communicate was going to be specifically in this way, meaning telepathically. And that's why they wanted me to be very conscious of what was happening so that I could remember and ask for it to kind of stay with me my entire life. And so I noticed that I was perceiving like holographic, geometric shapes and patterns as they were speaking and as I was replying back. So at a very young age, I kind of started to understand that there's more than what we're seeing around us, obviously, and there's a different way of communicating. Like, you don't necessarily have to communicate with human language. So that transfer and the entire message obviously stayed very clearly in my mind. But what happened was, since that time, I continued having different experiences and communicating and meeting different types of beings throughout my life. But I think what happened for me, because it came at such a young age and it was so conscious, I didn't talk about it, and I wanted to understand how it happened. Like, how was it possible, for my 5-year-old human brain to be able to see these beings when nobody else could, to hear telepathic communication when actually everybody spoke with the human language. So I was very intrigued at a very young age to understand the mechanics of it all. And of course, the science. And so that's why later on, when I grew up, obviously, I wanted to develop a whole methodology to understand, the fabric of the unified field itself that allowed this contact to happen.
So what have you found? Have you discovered how telepathy works? Because I, too, started out with, very strong telepathic communication. And I have encountered many, many, many different beings, including what the ones that you're describing, the ones that are not really corporeal. They're kind of formless or light beings or energetic beings. So anyway, I guess I'm getting ahead. I'll let you unfold the story, but that's one of my questions that I want to.
Well, some of the people have said, and I put this out as a hypothesis, they remote view from the other person's head, something like that.
Wow. Yeah, that's also possible. I know that could be done as well. But for me, there's several things that happens. First of all, it's a match. It's a vibrational match, as you well know. It's a frequency range. So that's why two beings can communicate and nobody else could have any clue, because they're not tuned into the same kind of radio channel, if you will. And so, so there's that match. It's a frequency match. But also, what the biggest discovery, and I think, that kind of ties it all together, was I eventually understood, and I could perceive the subtle energy clearly. So I kind of perceived the actual structuring of consciousness itself. And also how, you know what I mean? Like the actual, like, what is it made of and how does it behave? How does it work? And more importantly, like within what's the medium in which it operates, which means the unified field. And so, and so because of that, I mean, eventually, after years and years and years, obviously, I kind of, I saw and I eventually discovered the algorithm, if you will, of the space, what we call the earth plane, meaning the space that holds the earth together and beings together. And it's like a grid. It's like a cosmic grid. I call it the planetary grid because every planet has a grid. And what happens is that this grid, the actual structuring and patterning of that grid has a very specific, obviously geometry and alignment. It's actually 3 grids within one grid. So it's very complex. It's not just, like north and south, it's a lot more complex than that. But what happens is that I realized that it's all about coherence. So the human brain is coherent with this grid that is around the planet. And that is how the brains are all connected. I mean, what we call the collective consciousness is not some abstract, concept out there. It's a real, actual physical phenomenon because it's kind of like this grid, this network of fibers. It's actually made of kind of like, if you could imagine, photons of light creating this cosmic web. And that web is coherent with every human brain, but also it has all the ranges, like all the what people call dimensions, but also the frequencies, so that when you're physical.
Caroline, yeah. Let me just stop you before you go on, because this is really when that means that the people that were on Mars, that were born on Mars, that lived on Mars, the Maldecans and the indigenous Martians and so forth, would have a different grid than those on Earth. Is that how that works?
Yes. So there is a grid. That's what makes a Martian, because their brain is kind of coherent with that particular grid. And the people on Saturn or Jupiter. And so that's so let's say a Martian comes over here, they have to kind of adjust to their frequency back to this grid, this algorithm. And so that's the reason why, like, we don't right away. To me, it's kind of like the ultimate jet lag, because, it's like, your brain is so, the geometry of the brain and the structuring and the patterning of the human brain is so perfectly coherent with this particular grid that it doesn't know how to adjust very quickly to a Martian brain or a brain from the Pleiades or what have you. However, if you know, or if you see this geometry and this hologram, you see that there are 0 points. They're like vortex points, if you will, that like center points that holds this hologram together. And when these 0 points are perfectly aligned with the geometry of the web, the planetary grid, what happens is that you can do both. You can communicate from human to human, but you are now tapping into a much bigger range, which means all of if you can imagine that every planetary grid is then contained with a bigger galactic grid, which is then contained with a universal grid. And so if you know how to align your brain channels in a particular way, then it's almost like all of these 0 points, these pathways, open you up not just to the humans, but to any being within the universe.
Wow.
That's how it works.
That's wonderful. That's the physical explanation of the whole Akashic record phenomenon.
Right.
Wow.
And yeah, go ahead. Sorry, honey.
I have a quick question, because this is something very relevant to what happened to me. I was communicating with a reptilian from age about 4 till 12, and I think he was trying to align our grids, but it wasn't happening. And I perceived it as he was trying to suck my soul out of my third eye chakra and my crown chakra. And I was terrified, and I'd run away, and with my heart pounding. Meanwhile, he's back there going, well, that didn't work. How can I do this another way? And so we kept having encounters. They would block my brain, they would erase that memory, so I would go back to the same place over and over. Wondering, why am I doing Groundhog Day? And then finally, when I was around 12, I said, well, I'm not going back. So I guess he gave up. But then later, when I was journaling about him, he started communicating with me telepathically. And apparently, I've learned how to communicate in this grid. Maybe it was me having to learn it. It wasn't really him doing anything. But anyway, I just wanted to just say that because it solved a lifelong mystery for me, like what was going on. I don't like to see beings as evil. And so when I did therapy with Dr. Lessin here, I went, oh, he wasn't evil. I got his heart and his soul. It was not evil.
Yeah.
So I don't like being racist against different species and say, well, they're reptilian, they're automatically evil. No, that wasn't what was going on. So, well, thank you for explaining something that's been a personal mystery for me for, over 50 years. Thank you so much.
So it's a matter of will. You can decide whether you're going to observe at the grid of the planet, the solar system, the galaxy, or more. You have some kind of control over the traveling that you do. Do I get you right?
Absolutely. And Sasha, it's like a Russian doll. So if you align the small doll with the bigger one, they all whatever the small one does, the larger one knows about it, because it's like a one alignment, one flow, one pathway. But if the smaller the smaller doll is sideways, it's only concerned with outside itself, with what the neighbor's doing, or with what people think of me, or, very lower frequency that is not connected to the collective, to the higher consciousness, to the cosmic intelligence, then the smaller doll is just kind of separated. It's like it's plugged into nothing, So that's the idea, and that's the training. I realized that when you train your brain to just align perfectly with the planetary grid, that opens you up to all the other grid instantaneously, so that you could be communicating telepathically with somebody on the other side of the Earth, but also somebody who's on at the Pleiades. Like they don't have to be here. Because as you go through this alignment, it's as if you are aligning all the 0 points, all the vortex points in one line. So, and once you are inside that 0 point, that black hole, it's actually like a black hole, there is no time and space. So the guy could be talking at, millions of light years away, and you could hear him right here, and you know exactly what happened. So that's why we don't know. Sometimes people say, I'm communicating this, this Pleiadian, for example, being is here. Well, we don't know. The being is not necessarily here, but the communication is definitely arriving instantaneously on the Earth. Does that make sense?
Certainly does. Certainly the same as the phenomenological perspective. That yes, this is wonderful. So you can choose your level. Can you be in more than one place at the same time with the way when you open up, or are you just at one place?
No, of course, because you are. And the thing is, I just want to tell you guys and those who are listening that, we finally, I created the actual visuals of this whole hologram so people can have a sense of what it looks like and what it feels like when you look at it. Yeah. So because we found the algorithm. Okay, how does it work? And so these three grids are, like I said, intersecting at specific points. So there's kind of different points that lead you to different locations in the universe. And so sometimes you want to connect to, and that also explains a lot why people are where they are geographically on the Earth, because they're probably close to a 0 point or a vortex point that is the closest to where they need to be communicating. Where are they tapping into? You know what I mean? Are they tapping into the Pleiades, or are they going to, tapping into Arcturian consciousness or what have you?
Well, that makes sense.
Lots of sense.
Right. Wow. Are you familiar with Nassim Haramehn's research? Because yours sounds pretty much like what he's discovered. He calls it the singularity. You call it the 0 point.
I know Nassim. I mean, I know his work. It's slightly different. I think mine is a lot more detailed, especially in terms of how it works, in terms of consciousness. You know what I mean? Like in terms of actual experience. So that's why, to help people kind of get a sense of that is, I created the visuals. And in fact, we created the what do you call that? Like the script for like a software script that you can apply on Google Earth, and you can see the actual grid around the planet live. So you can kind of see all the yeah.
Is it shifting or is it in motion?
Yeah. So, you mean the grid itself? No, you mean it doesn't move? It moves with the planet. That's the point. So it's kind of, it doesn't. I mean, because it's the consciousness. It's kind of like the space around the planet. So if the planet is rotating, it rotates with it. You know what I mean? So, and I usually show that, and when I go to conference. Go ahead.
Is the grid the same as the morphogenic field?
I think it's more than that. I think it's more the grid system or the structuring of space that holds all of the information together, so that consciousness can function, so that intelligent life can function, but also. It also allows, I said there are 3 grids within this grid. So one of the grids allows for this communication. One of the grids is the time-space continuum, which is a completely different grid. And that is what allows you to have a feeling that you are going through space and time, So when you're on the Earth, you get a sense, I'm going forward in space and forward in time or backwards. But actually, it's this grid that gives you that experience. And also another grid within this grid is the transport system, and that's how you actually physically transport yourself, not like a consciousness. When you're communicating telepathically, you don't physically go anywhere. But if you were to teleport, or if it were a UFO, well, they'd be using those 0 points within the grid. So it's a lot. I think it's a lot more complex than just that field. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I just this is so. I had interviewed Omek, and she had talked about coming from Venus, coming out in a portal in Tibet, and having to go through several years of training so she could operate a body here in this grid.
Yeah, exactly.
Confirms what you've been saying.
Yeah, that's what incarnation is about. Like, that's how it works. We don't just show up. Obviously, I mean, we think the baby obviously just showed up, but the consciousness came from somewhere, so, maybe you came from Series B, somebody else came from the Pleiades, somebody else came from, and so, but how does the consciousness actually travel? I mean, so we think that, yes, it's instantaneous, but the space, the container is organized. Space is not chaotic. There are universal laws, as there's laws that makes it, if I'm starting out, let's say, as a Pleiadian on Pleiades, and I say, hey, I want to go down to planet Earth and become a human for a while. So how does that work? I don't necessarily put myself in a spaceship. I mean, that's a different way. But if I want to be born on the Earth in the body of a human baby, my consciousness travels and arrives to the Earth plane within this grid. And so because it had a different configuration, it was adapted to the Pleiadian grid system and so on and so forth, it needs to be recalibrated. It needs to be readjusted and reconfigured so there's a gradual training period, and where you get used to, you don't just jump in usually right away in a human body. You come closer to the planet, especially if you started off somewhere far away in the universe. It's a huge gap. I mean, like, that's why the light beings are they can't just materialize, because their bodies is just so different. It takes, forever to materialize. So we come gradually closer and closer to the planet we're going to incarnate on. And then eventually, when that consciousness is fully recalibrated, then it can enter into a human body.
Well, that kind of ties in with what happened with the Philadelphia experiment when they went through time-space continuum, and they lost the sailors lost they lost their anchoring point. And then some of them went crazy. What about the research by Dr. Michael Newton Institute, where they have uncovered that apparently some souls are very advanced and they are able to simultaneously exist in many incarnations or avatars? We like to call them avatars. These are human avatars, right? And many maybe vibratory frequencies or planets. What are your findings around that?
Yeah, these are two. I also want to comment on what you just said just before that, because it's kind of interesting to understand that. But this is going to get us on a whole different topic. But I just want to kind of mention real quick why the experiments didn't work, and why they were completely disoriented, but also when they went through the grid. Now that grid, another very important purpose for the grid is to keep us connected to the rest of the universe. That's the point. So that anything that happens within the universe is instantaneously landing, arriving. It's broadcasted, first of all, throughout the universe, so that every single planet and every single intelligent life within the universe receives the same information at the same time. And so there is no, let's create this planet and just, push it somewhere at the edge of the universe and kind of completely not allow anybody who's living there to tap into universal knowledge. That it just doesn't work this way. It goes against, universal, truth.
The implication is that it goes two ways, and if everyone in the universe, everything and every being in the universe knows what's going with us, that means we know what's going on with every being in the universe. You got exactly right. So that is really the purpose of that grid. And so what happens is that
We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Divine Paradigm on KCOR.
You are in the Divine Paradigm with Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Some call it the height of human civilization.
Share your thoughts by calling the KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide colors use Skype name KCOR Radio. More positive potential revealed in the exploration of the paranormal after this.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network. Broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
It's time, once again, to unravel the mysteries of the universe by connecting the dots of the higher consciousness.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Become part of the show by calling the KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide colors use Skype name KCOR Radio. Tweet your thoughts anytime by using hashtag KCOR.
It's my favorite thing to do every day.
Escape the Matrix and join the conversation live in our chat room at www.kcorradio.com. Now, back to Divine Paradigm with your enlightened hosts, Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin.
Hi, we're back. Janet, Sasha, Tina, and Caroline, and we're talking about the grid. And we're going to continue with the grid. You want to say anything before Caroline comes back?
That's
okay. We're sitting here on the edge of a chair. Tell us about the grid.
I think, I started by saying that this was the biggest discovery, if I had to summarize everything. It's because it explains so much. And so we were talking about the grid. Its main purpose, other than being able to communicate telepathically, teleport, and have a sense of time-space, of course, it's really to allow every planet to be connected to the rest of the universe instantaneously, and vice versa. And so the idea is that you incarnate here on the planet and you're a human, but you always stay connected if you train your brain to function here within the human frequency, but also to remain connected to the rest of the universe through this grid. That's how you bring universal knowledge into this human body, into this human consciousness, to evolve the human species. That's the point. And vice versa.
Let me just ask you something, because one guy that I interviewed, Freddie Silva, saying that the great sacred places on Earth have taken the grid into consideration and add to the grid the coherence of people that have worshipped there or communed there for millennia, and that these are right over those kind of places that you would talk about, the vortexes. Can you relate to that?
Go ahead, finish and then we'll do that. Yeah, go ahead.
So actually the grid is meant to allow the same information, the same amount of consciousness and light or what have you, to be present throughout the planet at the same time. So it's not like, you had, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like you had to be in the Pyramid of Giza to get a better kind of type of energy. However, if you saw the grid, the way I have it animated, in fact, I have an animation in the film, but if you saw how it's configured, what ends up happening, because it's 3 grids within one big grid and everything's coherent, everything's fitting perfectly within the geometry, what happens is that certain points overlap in such a way that particular point, that black hole, so to speak, is bigger. It's kind of like a highway intersection. So there are certain highways that intersect with 5 other highways, and other intersections that are only 2 highways. Do you know what I mean? So
a traffic circle.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were, there are 12 main points that are connected to certain, not really, but they're closer to certain what we call the sacred sites. But it's not necessarily that you're getting better information. You're getting more information or different information depending on what you want. So, because every intersection, like we were saying earlier, this grid allows you to communicate, allows you to teleport, allows you to simply connect with your other selves, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And so it depends what you need. And in fact, there's so much highly charged energy, the larger that vortex is, that it's almost difficult to actually be there, right within that spot the whole time. And so, because your human cells, there's so much, it's like electricity, it's like being close to a generator, if you will. And so your body is like, short circuits. But so that's the reason why. So it's yes, it's true. There are certain points on the planet that are more charged, but they're not necessarily better. It's just that it's a bigger highway. You can get to different places and do different things, more things in those locations. And that makes sense too, because it's like, okay, so if there isn't one like over Africa, so what do? You know what I mean? Like if you lived in Africa, do you have to go, like you have to go to Stonehenge, you know what I mean? So that's the idea of the planet and of this planetary grid, so that every intelligent species, every intelligent being that is alive on a planet can receive all of the universal information directly. We don't have to go to Stonehenge to receive this information. You can receive it. You should be able to receive it while you're sitting in your living room. That's the idea, and that's the point. And so, but you tend to gravitate towards the points that serve your purpose. So if your purpose is to communicate with Mars, then you're probably going to feel like, oh, I need to move, to Hawaii or something, because that is the closest zero point or vortex or black hole. You know what I mean? That takes me is a straight shot. It's a straight highway to Mars. So then, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you feel like, I feel like I need to move and go somewhere else. It's because you're feeling that is the next chapter in your life. So,
that makes so much sense about us being here in Maui, close to Mars, because Maui was part of Lemuria, which was the first humanoids that were here were from Mars. They were the Maldecan refugees, and that makes so much sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. Like this grid, makes so much. It explains so much. And so what happens is that the idea is that we come as a human, we train our consciousness to recalibrate to the frequencies of this grid so we can function. But then we're supposed to keep those pathways open. But what happens, when this grid has kind of a boundary? It's not like one line in the sky. Obviously, it's a hologram, so it continues on forever and ever. But there's kind of a boundary, like a frequency range, and so that boundary is about 7,000 miles above the surface of the planet. So if you can imagine that boundary being there, that would contain all of the information that would contain the planetary grid. So what happens if you came in and from somewhere and you position yourself in the middle of some of those main pathways? If you brought some kind of energetic block, so to speak, and you block these highways, well, then the cosmic flow there, the universal information, the universal knowledge pouring into the planet will stop. And so when you do that over 230,000 years, the species that's, inside, that's living on this planet, not having received universal information for so long, starts to be separated. It starts to feel isolated. And that's what happened on planet Earth. That's the reason why you look around and you see humans that are functioning, based on fear and greed and competition and separation. It's because they
What clogged the artery? What clogged it?
There's an Errol the Grey. Lawrence Spencer had alien interview, and Errol the Grey, the one that was captured at Roswell, and explained it. She said that they created a prison planet. This whole quadrant, I guess, has been quarantined, and a lot of people see it that way. Was there some kind of purposeful quarantining done by somebody to prevent us from connecting to the universal consciousness?
Well, there's actually two things. So the blocking happened by, there are certain beings. We don't want to name names, and it's this species and that species, because there's good beings in all the species and not so good beings in all the species. So you know what I mean? Like we can't say, okay, it's the draconians and the reptilians and this and that. We're not pointing finger, but I'm just saying, so regardless of who, but it was there's types of beings within this planetary system that saw that planet Earth was actually they came from beyond that, actually. But they saw that planet Earth was a very young planet, and it's not just planet Earth, actually. it's throughout this planetary system and actually the neighboring planetary system. So they wanted to experiment with this species. They kind of like go, oh, look at this new kind of, species. I wonder if we trained it to do something different, will it behave differently? How would it evolve? So it really started as an experiment. And those beings coming from beyond this planetary system understood what the planetary grid does. It contains consciousness and it blocks universal consciousness. So by them positioning themselves within those strategic points, so to speak, they were able to influence everything that was happening within this grid, meaning, the human species. So that's how it became a prison planet. It started as an experiment, and then eventually it went into, it's kind of fun to be taken for God, and to be like so. I think that we are
The other thing that's dawned on me as an experiencer contactee is that the isolation also allowed us to diversify creation in different ways that may not have happened if we were continually connected to everything. So we had a mystery to solve, and we were disconnected, and so that allowed us to be co-creators with God's source, but diversify our thinking, outside of the box and in different directions. Otherwise, we would have just kept going kind of into the same area because we were connected to everything. So it was a way of for consciousness and the continuum to expand and grow and evolve in different ways.
Well, yes, even if you're going the whole way, then the experiment and the experimenters are part of the larger consciousness too, and they're in our consciousness as well.
Yeah, of course, and that's why they were kind of, because there's free will, so they were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do. However, I actually don't totally agree with the fact that, because some people say, well, we needed evil to understand what goodness or what light is. And I don't really think so. I don't really feel that to me. I mean, everybody's got their, personal feeling. But to me, I feel like, no, we don't really need evil to understand the light and look for the light. Because there's so many different ways of creating contrast and creating separation as an experiential, as a holographic experience. It doesn't have to be real, because what happens is when you separate a species, you are interfering with their free will. This starts to break the universal laws. Because that child that you're telling, hey, I'm God, you worship me, you don't look for the source, I'm your God. First of all, that's not the truth. And second, you didn't give the child the opportunity to say, well, wait a minute, show me source first and let me decide. You know what I mean? So that's where I feel like this separation went in the wrong direction, because it took over the free will of the species. And that's the problem. So they could have created different types of contrast, different types of it. You know what I'm saying? Without interfering with the free will.
They reified separation, the creation of polar opposites, and thus a dimension. They confounded that and confused it with acting it out to the extreme and having it an actual separation leading to war and misery and suffering.
Exactly.
And you could accomplish the same thing if you just understand the principles of the grid.
Exactly. And contrast. So that's why I don't totally feel that, to me, that's how I kind of see it. But also I wanted to say that what happens is that with this grid manipulation, because when you manipulate the grid, it's like you're manipulating the brain. So the bigger brain. So if the human brain is functioning within this bigger brain, and the bigger brain is dismantled and blocked and torn in different places, well, the smaller grid, the smaller brain is not connected to anything. So it's like you cannot plug into anything. And so what happens is that brain, generation after generation after generation, 200,000 years later, that brain trains itself, becomes totally disconnected. But also the grid itself, don't forget, it's the structuring of the unified field itself, like the structuring of the fabric of space that was torn and dismantled. And that's a problem, because it's as if you were creating a hole within the fabric of the universe. And so what happened, this is just a quick reason, a quick explanation for those experiments that you were mentioning earlier, Janet, why they were totally disoriented. But not only that, sometimes they came out on the other side. They didn't have an arm or a leg, or it was stuck. Right. Right. It was like that because the grid is not functioning properly. It's like the circuitry is all messed up and the cables are torn. So you're supposed to start here and there, but if in the middle there's some crisscrossing cables and things, you know what I mean? So then you have accidents like that. So that's the reason why we, up until the year 2011, I want to say, the grid has been torn and dismantled and not really usable. Properly. And so now it's so that also explains all of these accidents. And so I feel that that now, obviously, the presence of different types of beings that are showing up on the Earth have to do with the reconfiguring and the rebuilding, if you will, of this grid. And so I feel like I know that there's a new when we talk about higher consciousness beings, it's not, again, just the consciousness floating in nothing. It's connected to a universal grid. And so those beings, I know that we are here mostly to reconfigure and this grid system. And once this grid system is in place, which it is actually now, then the humans can go back, tap back into the proper functioning of that grid and tap into universal consciousness again. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. It's particularly one of the characters that Gillian Green has told her uncle, who's Toth, has come back to assist in, is exactly what you're talking about. Assist in taking care of the grid and putting it back in place, and so that we can feel empathy for one another and for everything and everyone else too.
Exactly. So the problem is, though, where we are right now in the history and evolution of this the human story, if you will, the new grid is already complete. It's already in place, if you will, but the old grid is still there. So it's like you have the dismantled one overlapping the new one. And so that's why, because people say, well, wait a minute, if this new grid is in place, how come we're still seeing all the chaos? We are seeing all the chaos because you have all these people on the Earth that are still connected to this plugged into the old grid. And so eventually, that's what people call the separation of the worlds. What actually happens is that those two grids are not coherent mathematically, energetically, spiritually, on all levels. So those two grids are going to gradually kind of separate. And so then if your brain is tapped into universal consciousness, you're going to be totally connected with this new structure that's now in place that wasn't here before. And then the people who are still plugged into the old system, the old paradigm, will continue functioning that way. And so it's not that everybody's going to be converted, like, if you based your whole life on greed and destruction, all of a sudden you're going to be like this divine spiritual person. It's kind of like doesn't even make sense from an energy standpoint. So that's kind of what all the work that all the spiritual people working on their spirituality and consciousness, they're going to have that framework. In fact, it's already in place to start plugging into these higher frequencies and connecting with the universe.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. We have 4 minutes to break, so let's kind of wrap this thread. So is that what people are kind of calling the Ascension process?
Exactly. In fact, yeah, you read my mind, actually. It's that's what the ascension is. It's not so much, that you're going to go anywhere, or that, that there's a different dimension. When people say the fifth dimension, it's more of your entire consciousness can plug itself back into a universal grid structure. That's what the ascension is. So then that your brain and your human construct and your human consciousness is now tapping directly into that new hologram that taps you directly into the universe. That is the ascension. And so where people say, well, what about the others? So this is, first of all, this is where free will, that's the choice that many people have made. And I feel that every person who's creating their reality can find their own way. I mean, you have to, at one point you have to say, well, aren't we here to save them? And, there's this whole conversation, they're being left behind. And, so I don't know how you guys feel about that, but.
Well, I love everybody. So.
I tell you, it's each person is on their own path and finding their own way to the light in their own unique way, and I bless them. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, ultimately. However, it's sad to think that, there might be some loved ones that are kind of left behind. But we're coming up on a break here in just like 30 seconds here. So when we come back, let's talk about that and the multidimensional nature of ourselves.
I want to talk about the DNA findings that you got.
Oh, we're going to have that back for sure. All righty, well, we're at our break right now, so you're listening to Divine Paradigm on KCOR. We'll see you in about 3 minutes.
You are in the Divine Paradigm with Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Some call it the height of human civilization.
Share your thoughts by calling the KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More positive potential revealed in the exploration of the paranormal after this.
Looking for a radio show like no other?
We need something brand new.
Then tune into the KCOR Digital Radio Network, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and get ready for The Quantum Shift. A great shift of consciousness is sweeping across the Earth. Are you ready for the dimensional shift?
It is amazing, is it not?
The Quantum Shift, hosted by Dr. Sam Muggsy and Kent Dunn. Be part of the fifth dimensional reality, where consciousness prevails and the universal law of one is the only true reality. The Quantum Shift. Live Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Hello? I can't hear you, but you can hear me, right?
Hang on, I want to make sure I understand. So a non-citizen can go over to a hospital and walk in and get emergency treatment. That never happens here.
What happens? Jobs are created. Guess what happens? The economy grows. Then you have more people paying taxes. Do they not understand?
I don't want to hear any more about Islam. I don't want to hear one more word about Islam. Take your religion and shove it up your behind. I'm sick of you.
Fatigued by the identical mind-numbing viewpoints up and down the dial?
You fat pig who lies on his back all day, demanding that everybody else subsidize them. What do you do, jerk? All right.
Well, listen to the master of provocative insight, Dwight Lilly, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Whether it's local or national news, Dwight has his finger on the pulse of the nation.
So now you've got a case where Cliven Bundy, in an interview first broke in the New York Times, his comments are beyond repugnant to me. They are beyond despicable to me. They are beyond ignorant to me.
The Dwight Lilly Show. Never restrained and always opinioned. Talk without the fluff.
The world is about to change forever.
Get your weekly dose of truth every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific and 10 p.m. Eastern, only on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
How do you like your radio? A little strange, a little scary, maybe a little maze-mo, just for good measure? Well, then tune into After Hours AM right here on KCOR Digital Radio Network. Every Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, we take you on a journey between the strange, unusual, and sometimes downright scary. Again, that's After Hours AM, broadcasting right here on KCOR Digital Radio Network, 3 p.m. Pacific and 6 p.m. Eastern, every Monday night.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
It's time, once again, to unravel the mysteries of the universe by connecting the dots of the higher consciousness.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Become part of the show by calling the KCOR Digital Radio Network hotline number at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. Tweet your thoughts anytime by using hashtag KCOR.
It's my favorite thing to do every day.
Escape the Matrix and join the conversation live in our chat room at www.kcorradio.com. Now, back to Divine Paradigm with your enlightened hosts, Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin.
And aloha, we are back, Janet, Sasha, Tina, and Caroline. And what did you want to say, Sasha, for the final segment?
I hope we learn about the scientific evidence of how of DNA and what that you've been studying and what it shows us.
Back to you, Caroline. Take it away.
Yes. So what I wanted to do in this film, after all this year of working on consciousness and lecturing, and, I wanted to put it in a film format so that, hopefully the mainstream could at least also find that information. And because for me, as I started saying, it was very normal. It was nothing paranormal or supernatural to come in contact with a non-human consciousness. I wanted, so to me, it was totally real. I had validation my entire life over and over and over. And so what I wanted to do in this film was bring some sort of scientific evidence that contact does happen. And so we looked at different things we could do, and eventually we found Dr. Glenn Ryan. He's been working with water and also on DNA quite a bit, and there has been quite a few experiments done on life force and healing energy on, let's say, the human energy field and the cells, functionality and things like that. But what I wanted to do was invoke a spirit entity. The idea was a non-human consciousness. When it comes in contact with us, what happens? And so Dr. Ryan was working with actual DNA samples from women's placenta. And we designed several experiments. One of them was he puts it in a container, in a vial, and he measures the frequency and the electrical conductivity that goes through that sample many times. We really did it scientifically, meaning we measured it over and over and over. We did it over a period of time, and then we gathered a lot of data that he had. So we did it the proper scientific way. And so he measured the electrical conductivity and the frequency of that DNA sample. And then I came and I basically invoked a spirit entity. At that time, I invoked Archangel Michael. And so as soon as I did that DNA sample shot up. Like we measured 400% increase in electrical conductivity. And so it was like, what? What just had so wow. That was, just like that. It was very, very significant. Like I said, go ahead.
Did you get different things for like different spiritual avatars or different energies? Could you, was it varied or was it you?
Yeah, exactly. So that's where, it was so interesting, all the findings that we got, that we wanted to do more and make sure, okay, so what happens if I do my Archangel Michael again over and over and over? Do we get the same result? What happens if you did that? If you brought in Archangel Michael, do you get the exact same increase? Or, you know what I mean? So we wanted to have that specificity. And then what if I brought, I don't know, Archangel Gabriel? Now, do we get 400%? Do we get 200%? So we designed an entire experiment, a series of experiments. But in the film, we only put in one. And so, because for the editing purpose, actually we put two, but we have now a whole series of experiments designed to specifically do that, which is so exciting because this has never been done before. No one's ever, actually measured the presence, invoking some, spiritual entity and measuring DNA. And also I want something that's people don't know. Actually, it's Dr. Rines. He did some I can't remember the name of those scientists. I think it's the University of Iowa or something. I have to look it up, but I do have that scientific paper that showed that when the DNA increases in conductivity, electrical conductivity, it starts to repair itself. This means that if the electricity is going at a certain rate, and then you boost that rate, if the DNA is kind of not functioning well, or it kind of starts to change shape as well, from being two-strand to being toroidal, which is extraordinary. This whole concept, raise your vibration and raise your vibration. Right. Well, it is. This is what this means. It's raising the vibration.
Meditation and prayer does that. Meditation and prayer is bringing in the same kind of energy you did, but I'm still curious about which ones are more effective and how that works. Yeah, so in the film, so that's the first results that we put in, but we also put in the film another very, very, mind-blowing experiment. So what happened with that one is we measured all of the frequencies that were contained within this sample. Again, like I said, it was scientifically done, so we measured it over a period of time. And so there were certain frequencies that were present before, and then, well, I guess I gave it away a little bit, but, so after the contact with the spiritual energy, the DNA sample registered different things. So I'm going to let people go watch the film, but it's absolutely mind-blowing that we were able to measure scientifically evidence of this contact. So in the film, people may say, okay, well, how do we know it's not Caroline, as opposed to Archangel Michael? Well, like I said, in the future experiments, we're making the difference between when it's just me, what do we register, when it's me and Archangel Michael, what happens when it's Archangel somebody else, what happens. So we are continuing with that series,
But even as you watch the film and you think, okay, well, maybe it's Caroline. Okay, but even if it's Caroline or, the person doing the invocation, I am not touching the sample. I'm just, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not dipping my hand in the sample. I'm not injecting anything in the sample. I'm just looking at the sample. So how does that work? So the idea
you're making a coherent field with the archetype,
exactly.
with the fractal within you.
Exactly. So whether it's me or me and Archangel, a combination of this and that, we're still able to measure significant, tangible, increase in the DNA. I mean, so that's why this is very, very exciting. I mean, and it's just the beginning. Like I said, we've designed. Also, I did another experiment, which is not in the film, didn't make it in the film, but we're going to put it in the next film because there is a next film. And that I did. Yeah. And that I did. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys know Beverly Rubik. She works with energy. I mean, these guys are at the frontier of science, and they've done a lot of work with healers, to measure if there's any change in the electromagnetic field as a healer is, doing remote healing or, hands-on healing or something like that. And they were able to also demonstrate that. And what I did with them, I was actually in Los Angeles, and they were in the Bay Area, in San Francisco area, and I suggested to do a long distance, same thing, invocation with the whole with the same archangel energy. Now they are measuring biophoton measuring, which is different than what Dr. Ryan was doing. He was measuring frequency and electrical conductivity. They were measuring biophoton emission. So it was different, all pointing to the same thing. And again, it wasn't it was designed slightly differently because it was long distance. And they also registered a huge, their machines went up like same thing, 400%. So, I mean, we're onto something huge, I think. And that's very exciting.
So wherever you focus your attention, that's what becomes figure for you in the ground of everything.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what's very different in this film. Like I said, is people can actually now see scientific, evidence for that, and so this is a whole different level of just how many years have we spent talking about raise your vibration, well, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, and when people say you're an experiencer, Janet, that when you come in contact with another consciousness, you feel different. You feel different. We're not all crazy. You feel different because there is actual, tangible, physiological change in your DNA, in your cells, and that's what we were able to prove.
Right.
You see.
and it's a different vibratory frequency. I come back sometime after an exchange. I'm either traveling to another place or they're contacting me, and I sit there in my bed and I'm waking up and I'm vibrating.
and you feel different. You feel something change, something happen, and you can't put your finger on it, but you just know. And so that's why, now we're starting to say, of course, you do feel different because you're physiologically changed. So and so that's what, and so that starts to bring a lot of validation to energy healers, spiritual channels, all sorts of telepathic contact, all of that.
Right, and actually, it's like when I had a near-death experience, and then when I was on board the ship, and a number of times, it's a different vibratory frequency, and it's very similar. When you're in the dead zone, it's very similar sometimes to the dimensions where you're when you're in the presence of extraterrestrials, certain species of extraterrestrials. So that was one of the things that they were teaching me. I had a near-death experience, and then I was on board the ship within several months of each other.
Wow.
They showed various multiverses. There were 24 different variables on this potential future history. And, there's total destruction to complete utopia and everything in between. And in both experiments, one was from the global perspective and one was from the personal perspective. And these were like lessons for me, and that I was a chooser. So it's kind of like what you were saying, that, what I was taught is that I could change the channel or change the course and seek the direction, that there's nobody outside, going to do it for me, that the only one's going to do it is me for myself, and I had to learn how to do it. So I think that's part of that ascension process. Mm-hmm. If you find yourself in a negative down spiral, shift your channel, shift the lane that you're traveling in.
Exactly, and that's what we've been talking about. It's the old grid and the new grid, the old paradigm and the new paradigm, the divine paradigm. So the idea is that they're both here now at the same time. So it's a matter of you changing the channel. Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect way of putting it. Instead of, tuning into this channel, just change the channel and plug yourself into the other one. It's as simple as that. And we have all the tools now.
You imagine it, you image it. One of the things that one of my secret space program whistleblowers says is that the reason why the extraterrestrials are so fascinated with humanity is that we have the ability to imagine. We can image things. It's like magic. We can bring things down from higher levels into third dimensional physicality like no other species can. We can bridge heaven and earth. So I got that. I went, wow, that's true. We can do it. We don't even need like Tesla. Tesla, he would image something and he'd go build it and we'd be perfect every time. He didn't have to do a million tests and yeah. So go ahead, Sasha.
Well, just in existential philosophy, we would just say to those people that are experiencing themselves as in a dead zone where things are chaotic and not working, but they're not yet on an uplifting cycle, that it's just a zone to pass through, but it's worth noticing, and you don't have to make yourself wrong, but it's time to observe, and the next thing will come and it'll take you higher.
Absolutely. And again, I think the simpler we make it for the world, it's just like changing channel, like a software. This software makes your brain operate a certain way. This other software makes your brain operate a different way. So it's simply, as simple as deleting the old software, maybe one program at a time, and then just plugging yourself in. It's, the thing is, the problem, the good news is this grid, which is those higher frequencies, Janet, that you're mentioning, and what you were talking about, Sasha, as well, that, they weren't, the grid was not complete. Like, it's almost like even if you tried, it was much harder because you had to bypass this broken up hologram to tap into something much, further away from the planet. Whereas now this grid, this new paradigm is right here. It's just a matter of switching channels. It's as simple as that.
Yes. Wow. Well, we're coming up to the close of the last part. So what do we want to cover? We do have, let's see, how many minutes? I know about 5 or 6 minutes. What would you like to cover? Maybe 7 minutes.
Sasha, did you have some particular question or?
Well, I'm really interested in the specific distribution of DNA, extraterrestrial DNA in the planet. Do you have any generalizations about areas or anything like that?
Areas, you mean where the different?
Well, this is okay. So we know that Lemuria, the tips of Lemuria are the mountains of California and Japan and the Philippines, and Hawaii is one of the mountains. And we know that Atlantis Mountains are the Canaries and the east coast of the United States. We know there's certain areas, and we have some histories about how they were settled. And I wonder if that's reflected in the DNA that you looked at.
Yeah, I think as in terms of history, I would agree with you, Sasha, that would be the case. But I think now the new paradigm, if you will, or the divine paradigm, as you call it, which I love, by the way, I love that title. And the new kind of evolution, what is emerging on the earth, the DNA is surfacing everywhere at once. That's why we have children who are coming in at the age of 5, like speaking light language or remembering their past lives or what have you, all over the planet at the same time, because they are kind of helping the new grid, the new frequencies kind of stay in place. So that's why they have to be almost evened out throughout the planet, as opposed to particular points. And that also in turn continues to ground that new grid and allows them to maintain that connection, those pathways open, if you will, to the rest of the cosmos. So I think that is what's going to be needed for a while, until that new grid is in place, and then different points start to be charged differently again. Does that make sense, Sasha?
It makes so much sense. When, at the Council of Hatona, it was 12 humanoid species and 1 reptilian species contributed to the DNA, and each wanted theirs to dominate the others. But the time has come now, with the cooperation of the other species concerned with Earth, to allow a synthesis of the best of all those potentials from all those places to emerge in us.
So are we going to see some kind of disclosure from all of this? Is this disclosure, or is there going to be some kind of revelations from the extraterrestrials that are going to, reveal themselves in a greater scale?
Yeah, but I don't think in the way that people think. But I just want to add something to what Sasha just said, and then kind of I think it will combine with the disclosure thing. In addition to these different species, I want to say that at this particular time there is a very rare universal DNA that is also present on the Earth, meaning these DNA usually these beings don't show up in human form, in any material form for that matter, on any planet. But in this particular case, there are some beings that are carrying a very much different type of DNA that are showing up for the purpose of elevating even the current 12 DNA species, if you will. And so now this is just to, Janet asked earlier about how many beings you can have, how many aspects of yourself. Well, so what happens is that those particular beings are able to appear on the Earth at the same time or over a period of time, so that they can maintain their DNA around the globe and evolve it at the same time. So, for example, let's say I have a particular DNA from a further away from the universe, not a local, so to speak. So my particular type of DNA can divide itself up in a different way than the local reptilian or whatever, right? So when I arrive close to the Earth, and I know I have to implant my DNA and sustain it over a period of 250 years. So what I do is I divide, let's say I fragment my consciousness in such a way, my consciousness mass in such a way that I can appear all around the planet at the same time. But to each particular aspect, so let's say one of me showed up, like in the year 1600, another one in the year 1800, another one, etc. So looking at it from the perspective of the universe coming down, I have 32 different aspects showing up at the same time. But if I were looking at it as, here's the me sitting, here in Los Angeles or what have you, I would look at my other aspect as past life and future self. Does that make sense? But it's all...
It certainly does.
It's all me. And so that's why the two questions kind of are joined, that there are very unique new types of universal DNA that has been implanted and is showing up on the earth. And and it can departicularize, that's how I call it, and evolve in a completely different way, and it's spread throughout the planet. And that's what makes past life. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we have 1 minute to close. Please tell us your movie name again, your website, so people can find you.
Yes, please. So the best way is to go to the movie website, which is et-contact.com, and they'll see all of the information and where eventually it's going to be released in October, but they can look at all the events that we're doing in the meantime. And also, if people are interested in the consciousness work and they want to know more about the grid and things like that, different types of being, they can go to my website, omniumuniverse.com, OMNIUM, omniumuniverse.com.
Well, thank you so much, and that's perfect timing. Much love and blessings. Thank you for coming on today. Thank you for listening.
Great rapping with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
On KCOR. Aloha.
In 3, 2, 1.
Until next week, we must leave the world of the divine paradigm. But always remember, you all exist on more than one plane or dimension. And there is a shift coming. A shift to universal consciousness. A shift to the divine paradigm.
Divine paradigm. Divine paradigm.
For more information on the divine paradigm, as well as the hosts, Dr. Sasha Lessin and Janet Kira Lessin, please visit their website at aquarianradio.com. Divine Paradigm, live every Tuesday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Pacific, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Your transformational future is at hand.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.